Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. May I particularly welcome to the B'nai Human Rights Oration for 2025 our speaker, Ryvchin, and Naomi Levin, CEO of the Jewish Community Council of Victoria, Dr. Benny Monheit, President of B'nai Australia and New Zealand, Mike Zervos, CEO of Courage to Care. My name is Peter Shatner and I'm the President of B'nai Victoria. B'nai acknowledges the continuing connection of First Nations peoples to this land and their community. We pay our respect to them and to their cultures as well as their elders past and present. I also acknowledge that today marks 18 months, almost to the hour, of that fateful October the 7th, 2023, and there are 59 hostages still remaining in Gaza, with perhaps 24 of these still alive. I therefore wish to offer this prayer. This tradition goes back to medieval times. Jews have been praying for the release of captives for hundreds of years. This one is usually referred to by its opening word, Achenu, which literally means our brothers, but by implication, our family. This prayer appeared in Nuptial Victory, a 12th century prayer book authored by one of the students of Ryvchin, the medieval French biblical commentator. Our family, the whole house of Israel, who are in distress or in captivity, who stand either in the sea or on dry land, may the Omnipresent have mercy on them and take them out from narrowness to expanse, and from darkness to light, and from oppression to redemption, now swiftly and soon. The hostages, the soldiers of the Israel Defence Forces, the people of Israel, and indeed all of Klal Israel, the Jewish people, are in our mind today as we confront some very big challenges. Not the least of these is the way in which we as Jews are regarded by so many in the world. Fortunately, we have people like Ryvchin, who is on the front line to defend us and to advocate for us in the public arena. Later this afternoon, Faye Haskin-de-Broen, the chair of the B'nai Oration Committee, will present Alex with a very well-deserved B'nai Human Rights Award for 2025. But before I give you some background on Alex, allow me to tell you about the format for today. After I shuffle off the stage, Alex will lead his oration, followed by a question and answer segment, which will be chaired by B'nai Victoria's CEO, Alana Aarons. She will ensure that you only ask questions and don't introduce your questions with orations of your own. After that, Faye will make her presentation to Alex, and then we eat. However, did you know that B'nai does more than put on scrumptious afternoon teas? Yes, we do a range of things, including the promotion of lifelong learning with events such as our public speaker program called Armchair Society, which attracts over 200 people each fortnight, and our group of volunteers who help Israeli children gain conversational English skills via video conferencing. We're involved with the broader community with our annual youth art and photography competition, our various grants and scholarships, and we even pursue health with our walking group called Ramblers. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we offer social connection and engagement through a range of activities, including fundraising events, book clubs, movie clubs, and so on. In simple terms, B'nai can enable you to feel connected, engaged, and empowered. Today we are hosting one of B'nai key events, which is the annual Human Rights Oration. And this year we are proud to have a major champion of the Australian jury, Ryvchin, who will shortly speak to you about anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism and the battle for human rights. But first let me tell you a little bit about Alex. He was born in Kiev in the Ukraine in 1983, which makes him just a little bit younger than me. The family were refuseniks and attempted to leave the USSR for many years. They were finally granted exit permits in 1987 and spent 9 months in Italy before arriving as refugees in Australia. Alex, who was 4 at the time, came with his parents, brother and maternal grandparents. They were met at the airport by the Australian Jewish Welfare Society. The family was embraced by Sydney's Jewish community and offered advice and furniture for their home. The family was also selected by the Sydney Morning Herald for a story on Jewish refugees arriving from the Soviet Union. In the family's early days in this country, Alex's father worked as a taxi driver and also as a cleaner at the Emmanuel Synagogue, and his mother was employed at a pie shop. Alex became an Australian citizen at the age of 7. He attended public schools and finished his undergraduate education at the Sydney Boys High School. He then graduated with a degree in law and politics from the University of New South Wales. Alex worked for a member of the state legislature as a researcher and speechwriter before practicing law at 2 of the world's largest law firms in Sydney and in London. He served as a spokesman for the Zionist Federation UK and was awarded a prestigious Israel Research Fellowship to work as a research fellow and staff writer at a Jerusalem-based think tank. In May 2013, Alex was appointed Director of Public Affairs at the Executive Council of Australian Jewry. He was promoted to Co-Chief Executive Officer in 2018, becoming one of the youngest professional leaders in the Jewish world. As part of his position, he regularly represents Australian Jewry in the national and international media. He has authored several critically acclaimed books, including a children's book called The New Day, published in 2020 during the coronavirus pandemic to help families overcome adversity. His other books are The Anti-Israel Agenda, Inside the Political War on the Jewish State, published in 2017, Zionism, A Concise History, in 2019, and The 7 Deadly Myths, Anti-Semitism from the Time of Christ to Kanye West, in 2023. He appears regularly on Sky News Australia. He has also appeared on news and current affairs programs for the ABC, and he has written a full-page article in the Inquirer section of the current issue of the Weekend Australia. In 2023, he was honoured by the Jerusalem Post and the Jewish National Fund as one of their top 25 young visionaries. In 2024, Alex, along with Josh Frydenberg and Deborah Conway, were named as the Australian newspaper's Australians of the Year for their brave campaign against anti-Semitism. The Jewish community needs people who are eloquent and able to explain our case in ways that the public can understand. Alex Ryvchin is such a person, and I'm honoured to welcome him to the podium.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Peter, for that lovely introduction. It is a great honour to deliver the 2025 B'nai B'rith Human Rights Oration. I've had a long and fond association with this organisation both in Australia and throughout the world. When I first joined BCAJ in a junior role in 2012, B'nai B'rith saw that I had something to say and something to contribute, and gave me the platform to do so, and I'll always remember that. And I reserve particular admiration for organisations with history, those which have proven their value and shown their character over many years. And B'nai B'rith has 181 years of history, and all of the anguish and achievement that we have been associated with in that time is punctuated by the service and the actions of B'nai B'rith. Housing orphans from the American Civil War, founding the Anti-Defamation League following the Lear Frank blood libel, and advocating for the freedom of certain Jewish families like mine. And B'nai B'rith has always understood with perfect clarity that the fight for Israel, the fight for Zionism, is not about Knesset factions or the policies of the day. It is the fight for Jewish human rights. That one cannot defend Jewish human rights without supporting our right to live as a free people in our own land. I delivered this oration exactly 18 months from the October 7 attacks. So much needless loss and misery. Israel was dealt a sickening blow on October 7. The limits of its technology and its legendary intelligence were ruthlessly exposed. The pain and shock of those attacks will not stay in that moment. It penetrated the psyche and will live with the people in the nation in the same way that the pogroms of Eastern Europe tormented and conditioned the Jews for generations after. But today, through the sacrifice of the men and women of the IDF, Israel is emerging with the greatest advantage over its enemies it has ever had. Hamas is decimated, its ability to wage war is either permanently neutralized or at least pushed back by many years. The demonstrations against it in the streets of Gaza, unthinkable for the 19 years of its dictatorial rule, are testament to its severely degraded state and its inability to maintain domestic power, let alone project it outward. The Iranian regime is at its lowest point. Its isolation in the region spectacularly demonstrated by an alliance of the US, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Israel, which together repelled their ballistic missile strike on Israel. Hezbollah is battered and humiliated, and its figurehead, long believed beyond reach, is dead. The Assad dynasty in Syria is no more, and the country is in chaos. A Trump White House will bring short-term alignment on some matters of policy, opposition to university encampments that have glorified violence and menaced Jewish students, the necessary defunding of UNRWA, a commitment to backing Israel at the United Nations, and a willingness to consider paths to peace beyond tried and disproven paradigms about unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state. But Trump will surely also accelerate the collapse of bipartisan support for Israel, given that anything that he closely supports is immediately rendered incapable of being a consensus issue. At home, we stand on the cusp of a federal election, which I believe will be the most fateful our community has ever experienced. It will be the first where large numbers of Australian Jews will vote on the basis of which party can best keep us safe and which party will continue to view Israel as an ally. All of these events and forces, global and domestic, have once again thrust the Jews into the centre of the world's focus. News and commentary about Israel, anti-Semitism, Jewish life and Zionism has been front-page news for 18 months, unprecedented in Australia. Here and around the world, the Jewish question is on the agenda once again. There is a reason why the Israeli-Palestinian conflict ignites our streets, cultural institutions, campuses, and workplaces like no other issue. And it has nothing to do with loss of life or civilian casualties. The Russia-Ukraine war, wars in Yemen and Syria have been far deadlier. It has nothing to do with geopolitical importance. The notion that solving the Arab-Israeli conflict is central to achieving regional or even world peace has long been discredited. The rise of ISIS, the competition between Iran and Saudi Arabia, the tribal and sectarian rivalries that have ensnared Syria, Iraq and Yemen have precisely nothing to do with the presence of a tiny Jewish homeland on the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. As Morocco's King Hassan II observed, rejection of Israel is the Muslim world's most powerful aphrodisiac. It is an article of faith, a rallying cry, but it has no bearing on the chaotic relations, interests and grievances within the Arab world. The reason why the Palestinians matter so much to those with no connection to them and with no great understanding of them was best explained by the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish. The interest in the Palestinians stems from the interest in the Jewish question. The interest is in the Jews, not in the Palestinians, he said. The Palestinians had the good fortune of having Israel as their enemy, because the Jews are the center of attention, and the Jews have brought the Palestinians both defeat and renown. Darwish was right. It is only when the lives of Palestinians collide with the Jews that there is interest in them, because by observing this interaction, the world is able to draw inferences about the nature of the Jewish enigma and come closer to solving the Jewish question. Their persecution by the Assad regime, their starvation in Yarmouk, their discrimination in Lebanon and Kuwait has never concerned anyone beyond the victims themselves because there were no Jews in the equation. Those in Gaza who finally march against Hamas, an organization that has brought them only squalor and ruin, might expect the well-organized and funded campaign that calls itself pro-Palestinian to throw its weight and influence behind their brave stand for a better future. They will get nothing. This is because supporting ordinary Palestinians against Hamas would require them to admit that Hamas is at least partly responsible for the suffering of Palestinians. And this strikes at the very core of pro-Palestinian propaganda, which contends that Israel and its supporters in the West are the root of all evil, and resistance to it by Palestinians, no matter how barbaric or self-defeating, is therefore justified. The other inconvenience arising from the protests in Gaza is that they clearly show that Israel's determined and successful confrontation with Hamas is what has given Palestinians the freedom to march in their own streets and chant their own slogans. In other words, Israeli force and sacrifice is the only thing that has afforded Palestinians freedoms their own leaders have never entrusted them with. A further feature of the fixation on the Jewish question is the focus on Zionism, a national movement which achieved its primary goal of an independent Jewish state nearly 8 decades ago, yet is still a source of intrigue and often revulsion. The fact that non-Jewish Australians in 2025 would define their politics or ideology by reference to the Jewish national movement and use the descriptor anti-Zionist as a common term is remarkable, yet completely in keeping with Darwish's observations. In the theories of the Zionist thinker Leo Pinsker, we find the clearest explanation of why the Jews have always been subjected to this peculiar treatment. Pinsker was convinced that Jews were not hated because of their religious beliefs or on any social or racial grounds. Rather, it stemmed from the unique position in which the Jews had found themselves, their abnormality inside abnormal responses. They had lost their original homeland but continued to exist as a nation in spirit, and did so living everywhere but nowhere in the right place. This gave rise to what Pinsker called Judeophobia, which he described not as a typical prejudice but as a sort of fear of ghosts. The world, explains Pinsker, saw in this people the sinister figure of a ghost-like apparition of a wandering corpse, a people without unity and structure, without land or other ties, who was no longer living, yet still walking among the living, could not help but generate a peculiar, strange impression in the imaginations of the nations. Pinsker realized that it didn't matter how the Jews behaved or how much they contributed. They were feared because they could not be placed, they could not be made sense of. In Poland, for example, they lived for 1,000 years, grew to 10% of the population, yet they were not Poles. They prayed to a different God, observed their own calendars, celebrated their own holidays, pushed away the foods of the host. As Stalin once said of the Jews, you can't eat with them and you can't drink with them. What did they want? To whom were they loyal? How did they get here? By what fiendish designs did they survive Egypt, Rome, Greece, and Babylon? Napoleon was so perplexed by this people that he convened a council of Jewish notables, made up of 100 Jewish elders, and posed 12 questions to them to figure out just what on earth they were, and what they might do if he granted them enhanced rights. Mark Twain observed this same quality of immortality. In Harper's Magazine in March 1898, he wrote, "The Jew has made a marvelous fight in this world, in all the ages, and has done it with his hands tied behind him. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, and the Persian rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, then faded to dream stuff, and passed away. The Greek and the Roman followed, and made a vast noise, and they are gone. All things are mortal, but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains." Twain viewed Jews favorably, but still as an enigma endowed with supernatural qualities. The Jews were not hated because of myths about abducting and torturing Christian children, or gathering in cemeteries to plot the downfall of humanity. The feelings of hatred came first. The stories were simply manufactured after the fact to rationalize the hatred, justify the abominations of anti-Semitism, and recruit others into it. Consider the stories that accompany the Jews. Poisoners of Muhammad, betrayers of Christ, abductors of children, nocturnal schemers. This is no common racism. In time, those who sought to rid society of Jews were able to turn the Jews into precisely that which their myths and spook stories said they were, to prove their point. Pope Innocent III said of the Jews that they're consigned to perpetual slavery. Peter the Venerable said that God wishes for them a life worse than death. God had not consigned the Jews to perpetual slavery or given them a life worse than death. It was the laws of man that did this. Laws that confined Jews to ghettos, prohibited them from continuing as merchants and craftsmen, banned them from obtaining academic degrees or attending banquets and festivities, as the Council of Basel decreed in 1434. This impoverished them, degraded them, isolated them, thereby proving the slander about them being a loathsome and degenerate people who had lost the favour of God. This in turn justified ever more measures and indignities against them. The Nazis, of course, perfected this self-fulfilling perversion. They characterized ordinary people living ordinary lives in towns and cities as vermin, and then starved and sickened them to turn them into the wretched, diseased nation they said they were, justifying their mass destruction appropriately carried out with the common pesticide. The Zionist leaders logically theorized that if the source of all this hatred was the peculiar Jewish condition of having no center, no homeland, no living roots, the answer would be to give them that which they lacked, that which made them different, a homeland. As Thomas Jefferson observed, what is most valuable to man is the right to self-govern. So by attaining this right for the Jews, it followed that they would take on the same value as other nations. But the Zionist leaders were wrong in one critical respect. They thought that giving the Jews their own state would extinguish this irrational conception of them and endow the Jews with that quality they needed to no longer be feared and hated, ordinariness. But this failed for two reasons. Firstly, the conception of the Jews, shaped and reinforced over thousands of years of national traditions, fables, art, liturgy, and popular culture, could not be undone. And secondly, the Holocaust and Israel's rebirth did not finally show the Jews to be ordinary, fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapons, subject to the same diseases, healed by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer as every other nation. It proved the very opposite. Why else would the most elaborate human enterprise ever devised be for the sole purpose of exterminating them? And how else could they survive this, pick up what was left, and proclaim their homeland within 36 months of liberation? They just proved Twain's view of their immortality, or the anti-Semite's view of their ghostliness. Once the sympathy for the greatest crime ever committed predictably and quickly dissipated, the world would once again see the Jews as an irritant, a riddle, and a problem to be solved. Why? Because there is nothing normal about us, and everyone can see that. Monotheism was not normal. To believe in a single, all-powerful, ever-present divinity that demands we adhere to a strict moral code and ethical standard of living was not normal. It was a revolution. To march out of bondage in Egypt as a free people in a distinct nation was not normal. No one else did that. It is not normal to have your homeland taken from you and renamed to show you it is no longer yours, be dragged off into every corner of the world, and still cling to your culture, traditions, and memories under unbearable duress for 2 millennia and survive as a people. Not only survive, but often outperform despite every disadvantage, making yourself indispensable to kings and sultans, riding the tide of enlightenment, standing at the head of every significant human transformation from socialism to nuclear fission, from psychoanalysis to motion pictures. There is nothing remotely normal in this. And there is something uniquely subnormal in being plucked out, marked, plundered, humiliated, herded and slaughtered in our millions in human abattoirs, and then to ordain a new Jewish state, fight off the invading armies, not of hordes or militias, but the standing armies of 7 states, and emerge with the most powerful, innovative and progressive country the Middle East has ever seen. This all leads me to several conclusions. The first is that anti-Semitism is incurable. After thousands of years, it can no longer be characterized as a defect in human reasoning that can be untaught. We are not ordinary, and we therefore have to accept the feelings this invokes in others. The second is that if one of the stated aims of Zionism was to, as Pinsker said, create a new consciousness that the Jews are a nation like all other nations, Zionism failed in this respect. But this failure, the perennial abnormality of the Jews, and the incurability of anti-Semitism means that a sovereign Jewish homeland capable of gathering and sheltering Jews at any time, capable of safeguarding Jewish scientific and cultural achievements, capable of giving the Jews of Melbourne and Montreal somewhere to gaze out into when misfortune strikes, is a non-negotiable. It is the only true guarantor of Jewish human rights, and the foremost human right, the right to live. When someone opposes Zionism, they're not opposing the government of the State of Israel, or any of its policies, nor are they expressing solidarity with those they perceive to be harmed by the state or its policies. They are opposing, whether they realize it or not, something essential to being Jewish: the recognition of the Jews as a national group, the right of those people to equality, the right of those people to survive in a world that routinely slanders, dispossesses, and destroys them. This is why generations of Jews have felt a connection to the Zionist project. It has nothing to do with political parties or the politicians of the day. It is immeasurably greater and deeper than that. It is a connection to the Jewish story and to our basic rights. This is why Zionism is the idea that unifies Jewish people more than any other. And if someone declares themselves the enemy of what Zionism is and what it means, they're going to have to come and take those rights, because we will never surrender them. And this is why when we hear chants in the streets of this city that all Zionists are terrorists, we know it is the defamation of our people and the desire to strip us of our rights. We see the same thing when Randa Abdel Fattah, the Macquarie University academic, uses her publicly funded platform to declare, if you are a Zionist, you have no right to claim your cultural safety. In other words, we should expect to be endangered. And we see this when David Miller, who taught at Bristol University, takes the next logical step and proclaims, there are Zionists everywhere. In every town and city, find out where they are. What then does all this mean for the fight against anti-Semitism? If anti-Semitism is a disease with no cure, why fight it at all? If it has been embedded in the human consciousness over thousands of years, why would a little education dislodge it? We may not be able to eradicate anti-Semitism fully, but if we do not effectively manage it through advocacy and education, it will pose a constant threat to our lives and to our way of life. As we have seen, when left uncontrolled, Jewish artists, writers and musicians are deprived of the ability to create and do what they must do, which is to share their work and their talent. It means that Jewish high school students will feel they have no place outside the Jewish school system, which in turn diminishes contact between Jews and non-Jews, leading to ever greater animosity and distrust. It means that Jewish university students will again be urged to remain off their campuses or retreat into safe rooms. It means that each time a Jew steps out into the city streets in the kippah or with the Star of David, it will be an act of defiance rather than a humble show of faith. And if this becomes the norm, and it has already been the norm for 18 months, it will mean that Jews alter their behaviours, their professional decisions, their social interactions, in a way that may be imperceptible at first, but will eventually lead to a radical shift in Jewish and non-Jewish relations in this country. We will backslide into a time when Jews will sequester in Jewish law firms, Jewish social clubs, and Jewish galleries and publishers, not as a choice to enhance continuity and preserve identity, but from fear and exclusion. The Jewish contribution to wider society, which has enormously enhanced the culture, science, and wealth of the nations, will be severely reduced, as will our opportunity to be defined and understood by who we really are, and not by the folk tales and disinformation of mendacious online influences. Then we will find ourselves in a spiral we can no longer exit. There is, of course, a positive dividend to everything we've been living through, which is the renewal of Jewish pride and association, which bodes well for continuity. But we need to find a way to manage anti-Semitism so that Jews can feel proud without feeling imperiled. If we fail in this, Jews will be forced to choose between their Jewishness and other parts of their identity, as progressives or artists, for example, and the result will be discontinuity and loss. This is why education on the nature of anti-Semitism, specifically confronting the mythology and conspiracy theories through which it is all transmitted, is so vital. Equally, we must deepen the engagement with the non-Jewish world. There are two competing concepts of the Jew: the real Jew, as they are, and the mythological Jew. The mythological Jew and the real Jew cannot coexist in the same space. Wherever the real Jew is absent, the myth will be presented in all its scheming, bloodthirstiness and arrogance. But where real Jews enter, you and me, the myth falls away. The past 18 months have shown me something else. When we experienced October 7, we felt the panic of our vulnerability, anger at our loneliness. We felt what it meant to have a cosmic injustice delivered against us, and then have that compounded through celebrations and denials, as it has always been. but we also witnessed how it is that we survive. Through kindness, through strength, through personal responsibility. In these 18 months, I've spoken to and listened to more members of our community than perhaps in the entire 40 years that preceded it. And through the endless days and nights of work, this community, this family of families, has replenished my soul and filled my heart with love and admiration. Most of all, it has brought me pride of belonging to something eternal, and yes, something utterly abnormal. We are a statistical anomaly. Our being here today as Jews is the legacy of thousands of years of adventure and turmoil, upholding the same truths, the same faith, the same tradition, despite so many attempts to change or erase us. It's so unlikely that it must make us marvel at the workings of the universe and of the Almighty. And this surely is the secret to our survival. We know we have been given a rare gift, something so uncommon, so meaningful, that it is worth all the struggle, the attention, the burden, because to hold on to what we are and to teach it to our children is the highest form of resistance and the greatest victory. Thank you very much.
At this point in time, thank you for your candid honesty and openness with us all. It's been fantastic. I would like to, on behalf of B'nai B'rith, thank, this is Faye Haskins-Rowan, who's the chair of the Oration Committee, and all of her committees. She would like to say a few things, and as Peter alluded to, present you with an award. So,
wow, it's almost speechless. It's been fantastic. I want to say, it was last August when I contacted Alex and invited him to be our B'nai B'rith Human Rights Orator for 2025. As a person who is highly sought after and in high demand, when he accepted, saying he would be delighted, I was absolutely thrilled. I don't think there is a disappointed person here today. Let's give him another hand. Alex, thank you for an outstanding and thought-provoking presentation. Your insight into Zionism, anti-Semitism, and the battle for Jewish human rights have been both powerful and deeply compelling. Your leadership, dedication, and unwavering commitment to our community are truly extraordinary. Thank you. The work you do in combating anti-Semitism through your advocacy, writing, and public engagement is both inspiring and essential. Today is a testament to how much our community values and appreciates your efforts. We see and hear you regularly in the media, yet today we have a full house because people want to hear more. Your voice is one we deeply respect, and we are incredibly grateful for all that you do. In recognition of your invaluable contribution to human rights and the Jewish people, it is our great honour to present you with the 2025 B'nai B'rith Human Rights Award. Happy birthday.